Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head down to Barcelona in Catalunya in the northeast of Spain once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good couple of times before. This must be review number 6 or 7 that involves this brewery, but it's actually only the second one that you can consider as being a kind of solo brewery beer review. This is only the second time I'm reviewing a beer that is just theirs, in other words. So yeah, I'm curious to see how this one turns out, because I've had good beers from these guys in the past, and I think this is a style that I've not tried from them so far, but it is a style that I very much enjoy. So for this one, like I said, we are returning to Barcelona, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Garage Beer Company. So this one is called Now in Yellow. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, and this one is a West Coast IPA. So yeah, this one I think should be really interesting. My first West Coast IPA from this brewery. The other ones I've had have all been Hazes as far as I can remember. Their signature beer, of course, is the Soup, which is one that I still need to try. Actually, I think I missed that when it came through Systembolaget a while back in Sweden. But yeah, this is one that I picked up from the House of Trembling Madness in York, and I just saw they had a bunch of garage stuff on there, and I thought, you know, West Coast IPA, I always enjoy those, and you know, the floppy disks just kind of struck me on this one. I hadn't thought about floppy disks in a long time, so this was a case of, you know, bugger it, why not? But yeah, as I say, I've had very good beers from Garage Beer Company in the past. I'm sure it'll be nice to return to them, and I'm curious to see what their interpretation of a West Coast IPA is like. But we know that Barcelona is a very good beer city these days. Spain, generally speaking, is a very good beer country, and it always tends to be the case in Europe that if a country is good at winemaking, when it comes to trying their hand at craft beer, it tends to go very well for them. The Greeks, the Italians, the Slovenians, the Croatians are starting to do it as well, the Spanish, the Portuguese, all of these guys are producing some very nice craft beers these days. There's some good stuff in France as well, but France, it's very difficult to get a hold of their things. But yeah, curious to see how this one turns out. I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it, and fingers crossed it turns out to be as good as the other beers we've had from Garage Beer Company previously. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Garage Beer Company before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list at some point in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Spanish beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, but not as often as I would like. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Garage Beer Company. So Garage Beer Company, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Barcelona in Catalunya in the northeast of Spain, and the company was founded back in 2015 by Alberto Zambolin and James Welsh, who founded a beer bar together. So the two met during a brewing course which was taught by Steve Huxley, who was a Liverpudlian that moved to Barcelona back in the 1970s, and James is English. He comes from a tech and IT background, although his family have a very strong background in cask beer brewing in England actually, but he apparently moved to Barcelona to work for a kind of printing company. But Alberto is Italian, and he worked in advertising and design. But the two managed to, they actually met in a home brewing group from what I understand, but they managed to set up their brewery in only a few months, and the original brewery can be found in the Exemplar district of the city in an old paper shop. But apparently their first beers weren't that great, they said, but then one day, quite randomly, Garrett Olivier of Brooklyn Brewery fame, he walked in one night to their place during the Barcelona Beer Festival, and then he helped them set up a collaboration with Other Half. The two guys from them came over and actually helped them brew their beer. The first one that they produced with them was called the In Green We Trust, a session IPA, and this really helped them kind of change their direction and go on the path that they've been on over the last little while. But after that, very quickly, the first solo beer that they released was their Soup IPA, and this has been their kind of flagship beer ever since. So these guys had a really kind of interesting beginning. Garrett Olivier putting them in touch with Other Half, and then the Other Half guys helping them get their brewery moving in the right direction. So pretty damn cool, I have to say. But in the original brewery, they have a Bulgarian brew kit that can produce 1,200 litre batches. But they've also been very interested in art over the years, and so they're always hosting different events and displaying lots of different artwork from local artists. But in 2016, they did a round of crowdfunding, which allowed them to open a new production facility, and this brewery opened in 2017. And from there, as a result of that and the increased capacity, they've been allowed, or they've been able, I should say, to export their beers across Europe and to America as well, and they've began brewing different sour beers in the original brewery, from what I understand. But as of January 2021, when I am reviewing this beer for you, they've produced around 260 different beers according to Untappd, and a lot of the artwork on these beers is designed by James's wife Sevkan, who I believe is originally from Turkey. So yeah, that's all the information I can really give you on Garage Beer Company at the moment. If you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all those different beers. But yeah, these guys, as I say, probably one of the best known breweries from Barcelona these days, along with the likes of Edge, and you know, oh, who was the one? I'm trying to remember now, there's quite a few in Barcelona, but yeah, Garage and Edge are probably amongst the most well known from Barcelona. But I've had some, you know, great beers from that city over the years. So, you know, the Spanish beer scene really is kind of thriving these days, as it is in a lot of countries, but I really need to get down there actually and have a look. I've never been to mainland Spain, so that is something that I really need to sort at some point fairly soon. But yeah, like I said, that is all I can tell you about these guys. So, you know, you can go and check out all those links that I mentioned too. But yeah, it'd be awesome to get these guys on for a Meet the Brewery segment at some stage. And, you know, Edge Brewing, it'd be cool to get them as well. I've not seen a beer from them in quite some time, come to think of it. So, yeah. But yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So, as you can see, the artwork on this one is pretty kind of funky, to be honest. I did get a laugh when I saw the old floppy disks on this. You know, it's crazy to think that these things only held 1.4, I think it was 1.44 megabytes of data, so that's like two maybe three PDF files at a push. It's just crazy that these things, they used to have all the, you know, all these crazy amounts of data on them. But yeah, I think it is. It's quite funny to see these once again. But yellow floppy disks, you used to get them in like blue and green colours and all of these kind of things. Yeah, always quite funny actually. But yeah, really nicely presented beer. This one, it's 6.5% West Coast IPA, as I mentioned to you before. The hops in this are Mosaic, Columbus, Simcoe and Cascade. So as we know, Mosaic, lovely big kind of tangerine orangey hop from the States, 14% alpha acid. Simcoe is mainly about the kind of passion fruity notes. In a West Coast IPA it will come out as quite oily in that sense, and I guess that's about 11-12% alpha acid. Columbus, as we know, is quite a popular bittering hop, really kind of quite spicy and aromatic in a sense. And then Cascade, I think Columbus might be about 12% alpha acid as well, but Cascade, as we know, is about 8% alpha acid, and that is the original Yakima Valley hop. So yeah, lovely little bit of kind of figgy and grapefruity qualities from that, as I always remember. But yeah, really nicely presented beer, this one. 440ml can, as you can see, and I think I paid roughly about £5 or something like that for this beer. So that's maybe about €6 for the can. I'd be curious to know what the price of this beer would be in Barcelona itself actually. But yeah, I think about €6 for the can. It is an import, of course, so usually you'll pay about an extra £1 or whatever on top of what you would pay for a local beer. But yeah, it's something like that, and that would translate to roughly about, you know, $7 American, something like that, and maybe, yeah, about between 70 and 75 Swedish kroner for those of you watching over there. But yeah, really nicely presented beer, this one. Without further ado, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this beer has in store for us, so let's stick it in the glass and go for it. 6.5% West Coast IPA. Yes. Yeah, I really need to get to Barcelona at some stage and have a look. A big shout out to Eduardo, of course, who has been watching the channel. I think he studied chemistry in York, if I remember rightly, and then he moved back to his native Catalunya, and he is going to help me sort out some more Catalan beers and some other Spanish beers as well on the channel at some stage. But once I get through all my Dutch and Estonian stuff, and then there's another Finnish box to come too, so, and then an Italian box, so maybe later this year we'll see about sorting some more Spanish beers for you. But yeah, in the meantime we can review a couple of these because we do get a few of them through Systembolaget and things. But yeah, as you can see with this beer, it's poured a lovely kind of bright yellow colour. It's actually very similar to the yellows from the floppy disk, on the floppy disks in this. And I wonder if that is the reason behind the name. It is more of a yellowy leaning West Coast IPA. Remember, the colour of your beer, of course, is dependent on two things. One, the type of malts that you use, and then two, the length of the boil. The longer that you boil the wort in the beer, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour out of it. But it is dependent in the first instance on the type of malts that you use. But you can see that this beer poured with about a third of a finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head, but that's fading away to be a very thin foamy layer, and it does have just a nice kind of thick foamy ring around the edge of the glass there. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there. But if I stick my fingers behind the glass, you can see this one does have a good degree of natural haze to it, which is quite interesting. But yeah, quite an interesting looking West Coast IPA. What does it say that it has? This one has, yeah, just malted barley and wheat. So yeah, in some of the West Coast IPAs they do use wheat as well, actually. But yeah, it certainly looks like a nice beer, this one, and as I said, I'm very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma of this one then and see how we get on. Nothing overly surprising about this beer when you consider what style it is. I'm going to say straight away, it does come across very, very nicely. Yeah, so yeah, it comes very nicely. I mean, the first thing that's striking me about the aroma is this one is I think this might be one of the kind of modern interpretations of the West Coast IPAs. Quite a few of the ones you'll find these days don't have the same levels of bitterness that the style originally had. So yeah, most of them tend to, you know, quite a lot of them these days are nowhere near as bitter. You know, it's usually 80 IBUs that this style would have, but quite a few of them have been kind of, the bitterness has been toned down, but they still have a lot of the other elements you would expect of the style. And I just get the impression from this one that might be the direction they've gone in with this, so maybe just a less bitter take on the West Coast IPA. But yeah, it smells as if it's going to be a kind of nice bready leaning one. Remember, I think there's two directions you can take a West Coaster, and you can have them really oily and caramelly, or you can have them being, you know, kind of more bready and light. So probably the beers to compare them to would be Pliny the Elder on the bready end of the spectrum, and then the Sierra Nevada Torpedo on the more caramelly end of the spectrum. I need to get out to California and try some more of the different local ones, but yeah, for me this beer leans towards that bready end, just going by the aroma. But yeah, just to break the aroma down a little bit more for you then. So with this beer, you get a nice kind of soft white bready aroma out of it. There is a little bit of a kind of bread crusty quality in there as well, which I think is really nice. There's a good little touch of a kind of sweet caramel, which I really enjoy. A little bit of a kind of biscuity sweetness. A little bit of a kind of biscuity graininess in there as well. And yeah, overall, it does have a really nice kind of just malt base to it. It's a very straight shooting malt base, as I say, soft bread, a little bit of bread crust, wee bit of sweet caramel, and a little bit of a kind of biscuity quality too. So yeah, the aroma out of this beer I think works very, very nicely. So yeah, it goes together. It does go together very, very well, I would say. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. It is pretty good. So yeah, that's kind of what you would expect. As I say, really leans towards that bready end of the spectrum. Some of them can be more caramelly, but yeah, malt base comes across as pretty much what you would expect for a West Coast IPA, but not the sweetest one. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, I would say on the green side of things, this beer, it does have a wee tiny little bit of earthiness to it, which is going to come from the Columbus. Columbus can give you a little bit of earthiness, but the green component for me really leans, it's actually got quite a soft floral aromaticity to it, if that makes sense. It's not got the big kind of spicy notes that you can often get from Columbus, which is really quite interesting. So yeah, sometimes Columbus can have a good bit of a more kind of spicy floral aromaticity out of it, which I really quite like. But yeah, it's quite soft in this one. You've got a good little bit of soft kind of grassiness in there as well, which is a little bit unusual as well, because I was expecting this beer to have a really big kind of spicy dankness when I saw that Columbus was in it. But yeah, this one's got quite a soft, quite bright floral aromatic green component to it, and just that softer grassiness too. So yeah, it does give you a little bit of a surprise in that sense, but that builds a good bridge with the kind of softer bready malty side of the beer right enough. But then you've also got a really nice kind of oily kind of fruitiness to this beer, which is what you would expect of the West Coast IPA. So from that perspective, you can get a nice kind of oily and passion fruity note out of this one. There are a few elements of, you know, like mangoes and things in there as well, softer tropical fruits, but there's also a little bit of a kind of, there is quite a little bit of a kind of more oily tangerine orange there from the mosaic, but you get a few little elements of that kind of slightly almost figgy type quality from the Cascade as well. You can smell that slightly reddish fruity note from the Cascade too. So I mean, this beer in a lot of ways, the thing that surprises me about it most would be the Columbus just being a little bit kind of softer in a sense, but the way that the aroma of this beer goes together does indicate that most of the hops have been added later on in the boil. And remember, with the West Coast IPAs, they always had quite a hefty amount of hops added early on to give them the bittering qualities, to give you the bitterness out of the beer. So remember, when it comes to your IBU count in a beer, it's dependent on when you actually add the you know, when and how much hops you actually add into the wort. So if you add them very early on, you get all the bitterness out of them, but as you go along the boil, as you go along through the boil, I would say that you get you do get a trade-off between flavour and aroma and bitterness. So the bitterness drops off and the flavour and aroma actually comes out a little bit more. A little bit of a brain fart there. My brain just wasn't thinking how to get those words out. But yeah, the combination of things in this beer just goes together really well actually. So it's a very soft and kind of bready leaning West Coast IPA, this one, in terms of the aroma. So take a little bit of time to ponder that aroma over then before you get stuck into it, but we're going to have a taste of this beer now and just see how we go. So yeah, this one is the Now in Yellow, a West Coast IPA coming in at 6.5% ABV from Garage Brewery in Barcelona in Catalunya. So let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's pretty nice actually. Yeah, it's a really actually quite sessionable take on the West Coast IPA. Yeah, really it's a very kind of soft sort of bready leaning one actually. Yeah. It's really nicely done that. It's very, very well crafted. Like I was saying earlier, this is one of the lower bitterness takes on the West Coast IPA. And you know, I think it's interesting because I've said this in other reviews. I think a lot of the modern West Coast IPAs, they have taken the bitterness of them down, and probably the reason for that is that people, newer craft beer drinkers, because the craft beer crowd, if you like, is always growing, but the craft beer drinkers are more used to lower bitterness these days, and so if you give them a big 80 IBU West Coast IPA, they're going to think, what the hell is this? So yeah, these more modern West Coast IPAs, if you like, are lower in ABV. So this one is like quite a good gateway beer to what an original West Coaster would be. It's very authentic in everything except the bitterness. The bitterness obviously should be a little bit higher, but if we just judge the beer in terms of flavour profile, it is very, very nice. So again, thumbs up to Garage Beer Company for this one, absolutely. And I think the more that you drink of this beer, you know, the more kind of, it does get a little bit sweeter, if you like, and you can get a little bit more of the booziness out of it, but it's a solid take on the West Coast IPA. As I say, it has a little bit more bitterness to it, but not quite as much as the originals. You know, the originals were at least 80 IBUs normally. So yeah. But yeah, let's try and just break down the flavour of this one then and describe it for you nicely. So straight away with this beer, you get that soft bready quality just blanket in the middle of your palate there. I do appreciate that about this one, but then yeah, as you go, it's like a sort of soft pale malty kind of thing, but then that blankets the middle third of your palate, but as you go further back on this one, you can get a little bit of a kind of grainy crispness there on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, so there's a little bit of that there. But yeah, you have yeah, a little bit of just that graininess there, but then as you move into that back third of your palate, you can feel the wheaty element coming out of this beer. You can feel there's just a slightly thicker, wheaty, white bready note there, and it does have a wee touch of bitiness at the very back of the palate, which is quite interesting. But yeah, otherwise the wheaty side of the beer is kind of quite smooth. But yeah, and yeah, as you move back further forward on this one, you can feel the thickness just drop away in that border region, as I mentioned. Then as you move kind of further forward into that middle third of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit of a kind of sweet caramelly note there in the middle of your palate, but not too much, to be honest with you. That's the alcohol flavours really giving you that. I don't think there's... I'd be very surprised if there's a bit of like Cara Munich or something like that in here, or maybe even, you know, maybe even biscuit malts, to be honest with you. I don't really think that there is a kind of brown sugar orientated malt in this one, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, you do get a wee bit of that kind of boozy brown sugary note in the middle of the palate, and as you move further out from the centre of the palate, it does give you the impression of a little bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity kind of thing. But yeah, I think this might actually just be wheat and sort of pale malt and things. Maybe a bit of normal Munich malt actually, and maybe a touch of Pilsner malt just to give it a wee bit of crispness, because there is that crispness in that border region between middle third and back third of your palate. There is just a little bit of that in there actually. So yeah, it's quite interesting how that side of this beer comes together, come to think of it. So yeah, thumbs up to them for the malt base in this. For a 6.5%er, I think they've got an interesting malt base here. But yeah, definitely leaning towards that bready end of the West Coast IPA spectrum. And yeah, in fairness, I've just noticed on the back of the can there, it says, it does say a modern West Coast IPA, so yeah, by that they'll be meaning a lower bitterness one. So yeah, yeah, for me, on the hoppy side of things then, it's got a little bit of a, if we go into the hoppy side of the beer, in the back corners of the palate you do get a little bit of earthiness there. That will be from both the Columbus, and the Mosaic's also going to give you a little bit of that. But then yeah, as you move further forward, the earthiness spreads forward a little bit. Then you start to get the big kind of floral aromatic elements. It gets a little touch spicy as you reach the front corners of the palate, but then round the very front curve of the tongue, the beer is a little bit kind of lighter and grassy in a sense. So yeah, it does have a wee bit of a kind of spicy, zesty quality to it, which I do quite enjoy actually. But yeah, on that kind of front third of your palate, you've got that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way. They just kind of roll their way out of the beer. So as you go towards the back of that front third of your tongue, you do get a little bit of you know, in that border region there is a little bit of a kind of bready, grainy sort of thing, but on that back, at the back of that front third of your tongue, you do get a wee bit of a kind of stronger passion fruity, grapefruity sort of thing. So Cascade will give you a little bit of that, but that's the Simcoe that's really coming out there. So you get that big oily passion fruity thing from the Simcoe, and then as you move further forward, you can feel the Cascade, I think, coming out, that slightly red fruity quality from the Cascade, and then as you reach the kind of front half of that front third of your tongue, you get a more kind of oily tangerine note coming out of the beer, which I think is really quite nice actually. So thumbs up to you know, thumbs up to the tangerine orange. I'm saying thumbs up to the tangerine oranges. I love the tangerine oranges, but thumbs up to Gary's Brewery for the fruity side of this as well. I do like that for sure. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer has a nice oiliness to it. It's kind of what you'd expect. If you know Simcoe and Mosaic, I would say that those two do really dominate the fruity side of the beer. The front half of your tongue is distinctly, you know, tangerine, orangey and zesty to a degree. Then at the further back, it's the more oily passion fruity notes from the Simcoe that you get out of this one, and you can feel the little elements, that little figgy red fruity element of the Cascade just pushing its way out the further that you go into the aftertaste as well. But then on the very tip of the tongue there is a little bit of a slightly lemony kind of quality to this one, and that's kind of mixing in with the whole kind of grassy, zesty vibe that this beer has. So yeah, I like how this beer goes together actually, but like they say on the can, and as I was suspecting earlier on, it is one of these more kind of modern West Coast IPAs where the you know, it is one of these more modern West Coast IPAs where the focus is less on the kind of bitterness and things, and it is more on the kind of fruits and the malty side. But yeah, it's an interesting beer, this one. I have enjoyed trying this for sure. But I do, I do miss the bitterness of the West Coast IPAs. Would like just a little bit more bitterness out of this one. In fairness, I would say that. But flavour profile wise, you can't knock this beer. You can't knock it at all. So yeah, solid take on the style actually. So yeah, thumbs up to Garage Beer Company for this one. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel, I would describe this beer as being pretty much mid-bodied, right in the middle of the spectrum. The carbonation is very smooth. It leans towards the oily side of things, which is what you would expect of a West Coast IPA. In terms of the IBU count, you've got a good little bit of in terms of the IBU count, you do have a good level of you've got a nice level of kind of floral aromaticity to the beer, and it does get a little bit drier and more bitter the further you go into it. I'd say that this beer might be about 40 IBUs, maybe 50 at a push, to be honest with you, somewhere along that kind of region, but nowhere near the 80 that you would originally get from these styles. But yeah, nice kind of smooth malt base, slightly sweet, smooth malt base, slightly sweet, and you've also got just got a little touch of kind of dryness out of it a little bit later on. You do get a wee bit of crispness from that, from what I suspect is a little touch of Pilsner malt. But yeah, good little bit of hoppy bitterness, kind of smooth malt base with a little touch of sweetness. Then you've got oily fruits to this beer as well. So it's kind of got everything that you would expect. It is a more bready leaning West Coast IPA. That's the other thing we should point out with this one. But yeah, it's a nice take on the style, but definitely, as they say on the can, a more modern one that doesn't have the bitterness that you would once expect from this style. So yeah, I think we can round off the review there. It's been interesting to return to these guys. I really do want to get a review of the soup done at some stage, but I haven't seen that beer in quite some time actually, so I'll keep an eye out for that and see if we can get a review of that done. Otherwise we'll see about ordering some Spanish beers. If there's a good Spanish web shop, if anyone watching this video knows a good Spanish web shop that sells lots of different beers from Spanish breweries, different Spanish breweries into the EU, then I would love to know that. So that would be pretty cool to order something from there. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this review then. This one was the Now in Yellow West Coast IPA, 6.5% ABV, pardon me, from Garage Beer Company in Barcelona in Catalunya in the northeast of Spain. So yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Garage Beer Company, and we will return to these guys at some point fairly soon. A West Coast IPA, 6.5% ABV, Now in Yellow from Garage Beer Company in Barcelona. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and catch you guys in the next review.